My name is Nate Mickle. You're listening to Mickles and Dimes Layer 2, where every interview is dedicated to the simple, the practical, and the underappreciated. Rita McGrath is a best-selling author, sought-after speaker, and a longtime professor at Columbia Business School. She is widely recognized as a premier expert on leading innovation and growth during times of uncertainty. Rita has received the #1 Achievement Award for Strategy from the prestigious Thinkers 50 and has been consistently named one of the world's top 10 management thinkers. Rita has also consulted CEOs of Fortune 500 companies worldwide. She has written 5 books, including Discovery-Driven Growth, cited by Clayton Christensen as creating one of the most important management ideas ever developed. Rita received her Ph.D. from the Wharton School and has degrees from Barnard College and the Columbia School of International and Public Affairs. I hope you enjoy learning from Rita McGrath today. Well, Rita, it's so great to chat today. You've had such an impact in the field of strategy over the last several decades. And as you think back on your research, what have you learned about strategy and innovation that you would most like to pass on to others?
Well, I think it's always important to remember that you can be in one of two situations. So, one situation is where you know a lot about what's about to happen and you can therefore anticipate and plan accordingly. And the other situation is where you really don't. And so, the best you can do in that second situation is make a set of assumptions and then go out and try to test them and learn. And what I find is that people tend to use the practices that work very well in situation one in situation two. So, a lot of my career has been about how do you work in high uncertainty to knowledge situations to maximize your learning and take best advantage of the opportunity.
So, have you seen this in your own personal life and the lives of others, or do you see this mostly in organizations?
Oh, of course it applies to your personal life. And most of us, I mean, here you are in Kansas, right? We all have to make decisions where there's a lot we don't know, right? And we do this very humanly. If you think about investing in options for the future, which is basically what I'm talking about, it's a small investment you're making today, which buys you the right to make future choices. So if you think about going to college, right? We would all do that, right? I'd send my daughter to college. Now, did I get out a slide rule and figure out what the net present value was of her major in modern European history? We couldn't even do all of European history. We just had to do modern European history, with a minor in French. Did I do that? Of course not. Would I send her to college 100%? Of course. And yet, when we get to business, somehow we insist on a level of certainty that just doesn't exist.
Hey, this is Nate here with a quick ask. If you enjoy this podcast, please rate it on iTunes. Your rating helps the podcast get discovered by others and also helps me interview great guests. Now back to the interview. So, Clayton Christensen said this idea that you developed or theorized about, said it was such a profound idea. How do you use it in your own life?
Well, maybe I should start with what the concept is. So the concept is something I call discovery-driven planning, and it's a way to plan when you have a lot of uncertainty. So your job there is to take assumptions and convert them into facts. So a really simple way to use this is if you're up against a decision of whatever kind, um, just stop yourself and say, what are the assumptions I'm making about this situation I'm going to, and what's the evidence I have for whether these assumptions are correct ones or not? And if I don't have any evidence, how could I go get some? And it could be as simple as maybe I should talk to 2 experts. It could be as complicated as maybe I should build a prototype. But how are you going to create the learning that gives you greater confidence that your choice of action is going to be an appropriate one?
Have you seen a concrete example of this with an organization you consulted with or one that you've been a part of?
Oh, yeah, it happens all the time. So I can give you an example from Citibank, where we were looking at, they had this theory that they could take over payments for clients. So if you're Bergdorf Goodman or somebody, you have a lot of checks you have to write, and that's not really your core business, and finance is Citi's core business. So they had this theory that maybe they could take over the payment function. And we had that hypothesis. So we went out and talked to a bunch of people involved in payments at firms like that and learned that while there was too much entanglement with the internal corporate processes to actually hand over the regular payments function, that there was a category of payments called nuisance payments. So these are things like charitable matches or, the donation to the annual Girl Scout picnic and, little checks often, but they kind of got in the way of the big machine. And that the companies would be more than happy to hand over that function to Citibank. And so that became a profitable little niche business for Citi.
So What most surprised you about this line of research as you started developing these ideas and sharing it with others?
Well, I think the thing that has continued to surprise me is it's really logical and it's really obvious, and people are still treating it as though it's this incredibly new idea that nobody's ever thought of before. Because I think we get so ingrained in thinking in that frame of we know what we're doing that to recognize there's a whole discipline around cases where we don't know what we're doing is still kind of new to a lot of people.
So, what's the most common mistake that you see people still making when they're trying to apply these ideas?
Well, I would say it's before they begin to try to apply these ideas. The most common mistake I see people making when they're getting into new territory is they plan it as though they knew what they were doing. So you start off with a big team, an ambitious goal, all the money up front, a huge amount of resource poured into it, definite deadlines when you're going to be releasing. When what you should do is exactly the opposite. You should have a small team, modest goals for learning, a lot of clarity around the fact that the early steps are probably not going to work out the way that you expected. And so you're buying yourself the time to learn. And that's the biggest single mistake that I see companies making all the time.
Well, Rita, I really appreciate your time. It's fun to talk with you, and you've had such an impact in the field of strategy. And I look forward to trying to apply these lessons in my life, and I look forward to sharing these with my students and listeners. So, thank you so much for your time today.
It's a pleasure to have joined you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mickles and Dimes with Rita McGrath. What great insight she shared about a mistake we so commonly make. At any given time, we're in one of two situations. In the first situation, we know what's about to happen, so we can plan accordingly. But the other situation is one of uncertainty, and the mistake we so often make is not only confusing situation one with situation two, but also applying the techniques that work in situation one to situation two. In other words, when we're in an uncertain environment, when we're making a lot of assumptions, we need to collect data to convert those assumptions to facts. Rita calls this discovery-driven planning. This example is especially relevant for businesses. For example, planning for a conventional line of business is akin to situation one. Managers have good data, uncertainty is low, so people can accurately forecast the future with precision and plan accordingly. But launching an entirely new venture is akin to situation two, so it doesn't make sense to start off with a big team, ambitious goals, all the money up front, with definite deadlines. Rather, in situation two, which is full of uncertainty, we should do the opposite. Start small, collect data, test assumptions, and iterate. And I especially love that Rita's insight is relevant for our personal lives as well. When making decisions, we should first assess whether we're in situation one or situation two. And if we find ourselves in situation two, full of uncertainty, we should start small, collect data, test assumptions, and iterate. It's a simple idea. Please take it seriously.